If you took all of my gear away and told me that I could only use one lens from now on, I think I've got a pretty good idea of what lens that would be. But before I get into this topic, I just want to find out what your guys' first lenses were. And I'm not talking about the kit lens that may have come with your camera. I'm talking about the first lens that you actually decide to purchase. So comment down below what your first lens purchase was and why you decided to start off with that lens. So obviously the first thing to consider would be the versatility, since this one lens would have to carry the entire weight of everything that I shoot, from YouTube videos, so that means B-roll, talking headshots, and also client work, and that can be, everything from, again, talking heads, corporate specs, lifestyle shoots, all that sort of stuff. So it would need to be able to do it all. When I first bought into the L-mount ecosystem, the only lens that I owned was the Panasonic 24-105 f4, and I used that lens exclusively for the best part of a year. It was a great starting point for me since it had a fantastic focal range, good stabilization, and it also had a pretty decent minimum focus distance, meaning that I could actually get quite close to my subject and get almost macro capabilities from a very versatile lens. However, if I did have to go back to square one and start all over again, that is not the lens that I'd pick today. Having a relatively close minimum focus distance though is very important to me, and that is a massive factor that I would need to have in this one lens setup, since I do really enjoy getting close to my subject when I am shooting. And trust me when I say it's super annoying when you can't get as close or acquire focus as close and you need to take a few steps back. Anyone that's struggled with this in the past will understand the frustration that I'm talking about. It just makes shooting a lot less fun and kind of limiting, to be honest. So minimum focus distance, definitely don't sleep on that. So with all of this in mind, the one lens that I would buy if I had to start all over again and sell everything would be the Sigma 28-105 f2.8. Even though this lens is larger and heavier than the other lenses that I normally prefer to use, it's easily the most versatile L-mount lens available right now. The 28-105 has a minimum focusing distance of 40 centimeters across the entire focal range. So that means that you can actually get pretty close to your subject even when you're at 105 millimeters. And I found this very useful when I'm using the lens. I've also had no issues in terms of autofocus either, and I always found the focus to be quick, reliable, and smooth in every single application I've used this lens in. The constant f2.8 aperture also makes this lens great when you are shooting in challenging lighting conditions, and coupled with the compression you get at 105mm, you can get some really nice separation between your background and the subject, making it great for product shots and portrait photography as well. As I said earlier, the biggest drawback about this lens in my opinion is actually the size and the weight, because it weighs in at 995 grams, which is not light by any means. And I guess one of my justifications for this extra weight could be, well, I'm not bringing any more lenses out with me, so therefore any weight that would have been added in my bag with other lenses is essentially being absorbed into one single lens. And that's totally fine, but it doesn't answer the issue of balancing this lens on a gimbal. So, using this lens with a Lumix camera on a smaller gimbal is just going to be impossible. And therefore, if this was going to be your one lens setup, I'd probably say that you need to get something like the Giant Crane 4E or the DJI RS4 Pro gimbal, since they both have larger payloads. If you haven't already seen my full review on this lens, then you can go ahead and check it out here in the cards now. But essentially, I talk about how good it is optically, and I still stand by that. I mean, it's perfectly sharp throughout the entire focal range, so from 28 to 105 millimeters, the image quality is really nice. And I found this to be the case with pretty much every single Art Series lens that I've tested so far. And I actually have put my money where my mouth is with this concept, because I used the 28-105 exclusively on a few of the shoots that I did towards the end of last year. Specifically, one that comes to mind is a shoot I did in Paris, whereby I was filming essentially a product showcase video that included a talking shot, some B-roll and various other shots and stuff. And the 28-105 did a fantastic job across the board. It was also really nice not having to change out lenses between shots, and it made the entire workflow a lot quicker as well. So if you can find a lens that can do it all pretty well, then it can be quite freeing, I find. Another major reason why I think the 28-105 would be such a great option for a one lens kit is actually the price point, considering it costs £1,399. So that makes it just £200 more expensive than the Mark II version of the 24-70 from Sigma, and £400 less than the S Pro 24-70 from Lumix. This puts this lens in quite a competitive price point for someone who's looking for a solid workhorse zoom lens that can do pretty much everything. And if I'm being honest, I actually do utilize those focal lengths beyond 70mm quite a lot in my work, so I definitely do think that the extra reach is worth the money. That being said though, £1,399 could be seen as quite expensive if you're just getting into photo or video for the first time, or if you've also purchased a new camera around the same time that you're planning to buy a new lens as well. However, if you look at it from an investment standpoint and you use this lens on every paid shoot that you do in the next year, then it will earn the money back very quickly. So far, I've done 3 shoots in total where I either only had the 28-105 in my bag with me, or I just used the 28-105 for the entire shoot. So that means that even with the cost of the lens factored in, I'm still at least £1,000 up in the very first few months of having this lens. And that's definitely something to remember. It's also really important to remember that the investments you make in camera gear today won't equate to zero as soon as you've purchased them. So in other words, you haven't lost that money. So let's say I do go ahead and spend £1,399 on this 28-105 from Sigma. I could then go and use this lens for an entire year across multiple paid shoots, and then after that year decide that I want to sell it. I could probably easily get £750 used for a lens like this, which means that my cost of ownership over that year was only £650. And then when you factor in how much revenue I made from the shoots that I used this lens on, realistically the cost of ownership hasn't cost me anything. In fact, it's made me something. And that's ultimately the point when it comes to camera gear. So guys, let me know your thoughts on this one. Would the 28-105 be the lens that you chose if you could only have one lens in your camera kit? Let me know down below if there's any other lenses that you would pick instead. And yeah, if you did actually want to check out my full review on the lens, then you can go ahead and check it out here.